Hello and welcome to this new video. In the previous video, we integrated the Steam game inventory into the game, and we were able to display the items and open the game store in the game. In this video, we will continue working on the inventory service to integrate and manage the user's inventory. As already mentioned, it is important to distinguish between the game inventory, which represents all the items defined for the game, and the user inventory, which represents the game items owned by the player. Each player has their own user inventory, where they can find all the items they have purchased or unlocked. They can then use or consume these items. In this video, I will show you how to add a game item to the local player's inventory and also how to consume a user item if it is consumable. It's important to note that adding an item to the user inventory depends on your strategy. Generally, a purchasable item should only be added after a user purchase, and items that can be granted via an event will automatically be added by Steam to the user inventory. For example, an item granted when a player unlocks an achievement. Note that via the web API, you can add any item, regardless of its type. The task Get Steam Player Inventory is used to return the inventory of a specific player. Therefore, you should not allow the local player to obtain another player's inventory. The user inventory returned is an array of user inventory structures. A user inventory item structure contains all the information about an item in the user inventory. Each inventory item has a unique item ID. It is important not to confuse the item definition ID with the user item ID. The structure also indicates the quantity owned of that item, the acquisition date, the item state, and the origin of the item. We will use this structure to create a table representing the local user inventory. Go to the designer and duplicate the table to create the table for the local user inventory. Use the structure to create the columns of the table. I also want to display the icon in the user inventory. Under the Consume column, I will display a button that serves to consume the item. I set the layout of the size boxes. To create the item widget, I will duplicate the item widget from the game inventory. Fix the widget to match the user inventory table. I set the layout of the size boxes. Add an item to the scroll box to get a preview of the table. I need to add the Consume button. The icon URL must be passed as input to this widget. Change the item type so that it matches the structure of a user inventory item. Fix the Update Content function. Create the icon URL variable. Add the onClicked event for the Consume button. To consume the item, we need its unique ID. Call the task the Consume a Steam Player Inventory item. This task is used to consume an item from a user's inventory. The quantity parameter specifies the amount of the item to consume. In this example, I want to consume the entire quantity. In a real game, you should allow the player to specify the quantity to consume. In a real game, you must give the player a benefit after consuming the item, depending on the item consumed. It is up to you to implement the logic according to your game. Display an error message if the call fails. I display a message on the screen indicating that the consumption is done. I don't want to allow the player to consume an item defined as non-consumable. Note that the Web API allows consuming any item, so I will make this button non-clickable for items defined as non-consumable. In the previous video, I showed you how I added my own isConsumable property, so I will use it to determine if an item is consumable or not. Add a Boolean variable that indicates whether the item is consumable or not. Then create a binding to enable or disable the button based on this Boolean. In the Inventory widget, we need to add the implementation for obtaining the local user inventory in the refresh event. Add a sequence to also update the local user inventory table. Call the task Get Steam Player Inventory by providing the local user ID. Promote the output to a variable. Display an error message if the call fails. It is important to note that items in the user inventory need to be consolidated to ensure that items have quantities greater than or equal to 1. For example, if you add the same item multiple times to the user inventory, it will be duplicated with a quantity of 1 for each duplicate. The consolidation is useful to merge these duplicates into a single item and sum the quantities. Therefore, it is useful to call it on each refresh before displaying the table. Call the task Consolidate Steam Items in Player Inventory. You need to pass the list of item definition IDs to this task. In this example, I will pass all the item definition IDs from the user inventory. Create a function to obtain the list of item definition IDs from the user inventory. The implementation involves looping through the user inventory to create and return this list. Create a local variable representing this list. Return the list once the loop is finished. Call this function and connect the output to the task. Display an error message if the call fails. Add a short delay to ensure that Steam has finished the consolidation. We need to obtain the user inventory again, since it has been changed after the consolidation. Update the Steam Player Inventory variable. Clear the user inventory scroll box. For each inventory item, create an item widget to update the scroll box. we need to pass the icon URL and the boolean is consumable. Therefore, add a function to find the icon URL from the game inventory. The implementation involves obtaining the item definition ID from the user item, then searching for the icon URL in the game inventory. Therefore, we need to pass the user item as a parameter. Loop through the game inventory to find the icon URL using the item definition ID of the user item. Call this function and then connect its output. Create a function to determine if the user item is consumable or not. The implementation involves finding the user item in the game inventory, then using the JSON string response to find the custom property is consumable. Once the item is found, use the load JSON from string node. Make sure that the JSON plugins are enabled in your project. Use the getField function, providing the name of the custom property. The return value is a wildcard, so you need to cast it to a type. In this case, it can be obtained as a Boolean. It's the same process to follow for all custom properties. Call the function and then connect its output. We need to implement the Add to User Inventory button in the Game Inventory Item widget. It's important to note that in this video, I am adding items without a purchase. In the next video, we will see how to implement in-app purchases and add purchasable items to the user inventory. The task Add Steam Items to Player Inventory is used to add one or more items to a player's inventory. In this example, I am adding a single item with each call. Be careful with the user ID to which you're adding items. It should be the local user ID. Remember that in a real game, web API calls should be made on a dedicated server. The task Add Steam Promo Items is used to add promo items defined as manual. However, you can add anything with the first task, regardless of the item's definition. I'm just pointing this out, but for this video, I don't want to use it. You need to provide a list of item definition IDs to add. For my case, I am only adding the game item from this widget. If notify is true, Steam considers that the player is not in the game and should receive a notification. The request ID can be used to repeat the same addition of items next time without defining the list of items to add. If trade restriction is true, Steam applies market and trade cooldowns as if this was a purchased item. Display an error message if the call fails. I display a message on the screen indicating that the addition has been successfully made. In the Inventory widget, I will add a button to exchange user items for item 4. This is just to show you how to exchange user items. In a real game, you should have an intelligent implementation for item exchanges. Add the on-clicked event. As you can see, item 4 is an item that can be obtained through exchange. In the exchange expression, we see that it can be obtained by exchanging either 1 item 1 and 1 item 3, or 1 item 2 or 5 item 3. I will implement an exchange logic for 1 item 1 and 1 item 3 to obtain this item. Call the task Exchange Steam Player Inventory Items, which is used to perform an exchange of items owned by a user. Items to exchange is a map of key value pairs, where the key is the item ID to exchange and the value is the quantity of that item to exchange. The output item def ID is the item def ID to obtain through this exchange. In my case, it will be item 4. Add a function that checks if the player meets the exchange condition and returns the exchange map to provide to the task. To keep it simple, the implementation involves looping through the player inventory to check for the presence of item 1 and item 3. In this case, the map will be filled to perform the exchange. Call the function and connect the output. Display an error message if the call fails, and a message on the screen otherwise. Everything is good, there's just one task that I haven't used in this video. As you can see in the User Inventory Item widget, we already have the quantity of the item returned by the Get Player Inventory task. In fact, you can also use the Get Steam Player Inventory Items Quantity task, which returns the quantities of each item in the user inventory. I forgot to provide the local user ID to the Add Item task. Launch your game to test. For now, the user doesn't have any items in their inventory, which is normal since we haven't added anything yet. Add item 1, then click on Refresh. And there you go, the user now owns item 1 in their inventory. This item has a unique ID. We can also see the item def ID, which is 1, and the quantity, which is 1. We also have the acquisition date, the state is empty, and the origin is external. This item is not consumable, so the button is disabled. Try to add the same item again, then click on Refresh. Here you go, the user inventory is consolidated, and the quantity is now 2. Without the consolidation process, the item would be duplicated, and the quantity would remain 1 for each duplicate. Add item 2 and verify its addition. Add item 3, then click on Refresh. The item is successfully added, but its quantity is 1, while the quantity defined in its definition is 10. I want to draw your attention to the fact that Steam does not add the defined quantity to the item. However, it is up to you to use that quantity to add the item 10 times. We can now perform an exchange because we have items 1 and 3 in the inventory. After the exchange, we will have 0 item 3 and 1 item 1. Click on Exchange. Then on Refresh. And there you go, the exchange has been made. The user now has item 4, and we can clearly see that they have no item 3 and only 1 item 1. If you click on Exchange again, you will get an error message. This is normal because the user no longer meets the exchange condition since it has 0 item 3. Add item 3, then perform the exchange. It should work. There you go, the items have been exchanged, and the user now has 2 item 4s. Item 4 can also be added via the web API. It's up to you to limit its addition in your game. Item 5 is a bundle, so when it's added, the bundle will be executed. As a result, item 1 and item 2 will be added to the user inventory. There you go, the user now has 1 item 1 and 3 item 2. Item 6 is a generator, so when it's added, the user will have a 50% chance of getting item 2, a 30% chance of getting item 1, and a 20% chance of getting item 3. The user obtained an item 1. Try again, and it might obtains another item. Item 7 is a promo item of the achievement type. To test its acquisition, create and unlock one of the achievements mentioned. What I want to do is add it directly. This item is consumable, so you can click on Consume to use it. There you go, it has been successfully consumed. Item 8 is also a promo item, but of the manual type. A manual promo item can only be obtained by addition, so click on Add. Click on Consume to use it. Item 9 is also a promo item, but of the playtime type. Achieve the playtime to obtain it. For this test, I will add it directly. In this video, I showed you a basic example of inventory management. What you need to note is that it's up to you to implement a profit system when an item is consumed, and an equipping system when a non-consumable item is selected, for example, a skin that can be applied to a weapon. If you want to clear the user inventory, remove the binding of the Consume button and then consume all the items in the inventory. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.